Hola amigos, welcome to episode 8. It's a bit shorter than the last episode. Some people complained they were getting too long, so this one's not that long. Coming up in this episode we have history.
And Huayna Capac died in Quito, like I said, 3,000 kilometers north of Cusco.
We have geography.
When you take into consideration following a trail going up and down over mountains, rivers, passes, it would come out to around about 600 kilometers.
We have geology.
These boulders seem to be some kind of conglomerate. They've these white rocks inside the black rock.
We have cynology.
These are native Peruvian hairless dogs, also known as viringos.
And we have gastronomy.
Another strange thing that they have here is this fruit called pepino dulce or sweet cucumber. So Angelo and I have just had our bikes blessed by the Catholic priest at Señor de Huanca. It was all pretty quick and over in less than a minute. From there we rode down the mountain and into the Sacred Valley. And we followed the Rio Urubamba, also known as the Vilcanota. We followed it southeast. You see that bridge on the left? It's for a little village called Pacor, and it's classed as a carrozable puente, which means it can support the weight of a vehicle. Others are called no carrozable, which means they can't carry the weight of a vehicle, only for pedestrians and maybe a motorcycle, or a donkey maybe. I love these sweeping curves. I really want to give it a bit more throttle, but the engine's still being broken in, so I just have to resist the temptation. You might remember in previous episodes I said how the Inca rulers used to have estates and orchards in this valley because it was warmer than Cusco. And you might remember my bike was assembled in a street called Huayna Capac. Well, there is an interesting 500-year-old document that lists all the history and ownership struggles of the UK Valley, and it says Huayna Capac employed 2,000 workers from all parts of the Inca Empire to build houses, agricultural terraces, plant orchards, etc. here in what's now called the Sacred Valley of the Incas. It also relates how Huayna Capac, to keep them occupied, he had earth, like soil, transported from what is now Ecuador to this valley to fertilise his orchards and his andenes, which are these raised platforms, agricultural platforms. Now that distance is well over 3,000 kilometres, and 500 years ago there were no horses, no carts in Peru, only llamas that can carry a maximum of 50 kilos for between 10 and 12 kilometres, which is only about 5 to 8 miles in a day. You'll also remember previously I spoke about Lake Urcos and a conquistador called Diego Maldonado, who was given an Inca palace where Paddy's Irish Pub now stands. Well, his name appears in this document as well, along with some other conquistadors, and they were all gifted lots of land, and there's even a map in this document around Lake Urcos. Now, Huayna Capac was the father of Huascar and Atahualpa, the two brothers who went to war. And Huayna Capac died in Quito, like I said, 3,000 kilometers north of Cusco. But when he died, they embalmed his body and transported along the Chinchasuyo Quarter Royal Inca Road. And then it was stored in a building on his estate here in the UK Valley. And a large contingent of servants, it was their job to work the land, serve him, and treat him as if he was still alive. So the Inca kings saw this valley as paradise on earth, and that's why they had their summer estates here. And just riding along today, it's so beautiful, I can see why. But there is a blot on that history. Within 10 years of Pizarro arriving, a Spanish priest was writing to the King of Spain, denouncing the fact that more than a dozen Inca noblemen were lured down to the valley on the pretext of being given land, but were actually executed by drowning or burning alive without the benefit of a judge, a trial, or even a priest to give them the last rites. Now we're going to turn off here to visit my friend Kevin, who I met in Cusco. He's a bike rider. He's ridden 3 different bikes on 3 different continents: North America, South America and Africa. He's from Chicago, but he worked in Hollywood as a set and prop guy, building sets and props. Very interesting fellow. And he's actually building his own adobe farmhouse here that we're going to go and see. Look at these boulders. I bet you they came down about a year ago. They had terrible rainstorms here in the valley, and a lot of boulders rolled across roads. They just dislodge because the Andes are still rising, I think at the rate of half an inch a year or something, and at certain spots it just gets all too much and these boulders come rolling down after heavy rain. These boulders seem to be some kind of conglomerate. They've these white rocks inside the black rock. Their house is set up a fair way from the main road. I imagine his experience as a Hollywood set builder would come in very handy when it came to building his own house. There he is. Now, Kevin's only 2 days older than me, but he's a bit taller and he's a bit more experienced on a motorbike. I first met him and his Peruvian wife Raquel in Norton Bikers Bar. I think Jeff introduced us and we just got on really well.
Más.
Ahí está bien.
They locked all their tools up in this shipping container while they themselves slept in a tent, and right now it's the rainy season. But imagine how much money they saved, and they seem to like it. I mean, he's already ridden a motorbike all through Africa. I'm sure he's had more uncomfortable nights. This is the container as you see it from the side. He was making the roof out of reeds that grew locally. You can see he's employed the trapezoid-shaped windows like the Incas used to. This is the outhouse, the toilet. It's the only sort of building that's actually finished. They don't have running water or electricity at this point in time. He had a couple of guys helping him. They were employed to make the adobe bricks on site. A very ecological, green, non-polluting building method. You can see on the right-hand side, on the interior wall, they've rendered it with adobe mud, and it looks very smooth and professional looking. Although it seemed like they were in paradise, Kevin said they did have a few problems with the neighbours grazing animals on their land, sometimes right out the front of their tent. So he had these signs made. I decided I was heading south to Patagonia, but there was two ways I could go. I could go down to Tacna Rica and straight down the coastal highway of Chile, or I could go a little bit southeast and go through the Altiplano a bit more through Bolivia. But I knew that the road there is, a lot of it's unpaved, a lot of it's rocky, sandy. So I wanted to ask Kevin, just how bad is it? And he gave me a few valuable words of advice.
Just a simple way to then come back to Chile in the north. His bike's going to be crashing all the time because I met a guy in, ¿cómo se llama el pueblo? Es Potosí y no es Sucre.
Santa Cruz.
Santa Cruz? No. Santa
Oruro.
No. Sucre? Posiblemente es Sucre. And I met this guy, and he's his whole life a motorcycle guy. And he said, I want to go to Salar de Uyuni, and can I go with you? I said, I don't know, because I didn't feel so experienced. And then I was really self-conscious, even though I'd been on the road for a year. And so then he convinced me to go because he was really funny. Now he's one of my best buddies. And then in the next 2 weeks, he crashed 5 times and I crashed 2 or 3 times. But not crash, just turning like this. And it's just en la arena, ripio, es difícil.
Es similar, así puede ser igual a esto más o menos.
La primera vez estuve camping al lado la carretera y yo necesito pasar piedras grandes, piedras como esta. And then when I stopped, I couldn't put my foot down. I was too high, and then I just went, ah! And you just lay the bike down. That's it. Okay, it's so normal.
The more Kevin spoke, the more clear-cut it became. I had the choice of straight, desert, well-maintained Chilean roads or really, really rough southern Bolivia roads. And I was also constrained by the time factor because I had to get down to Patagonia before it got too cold. Then he said something that really sort of just made the decision for me.
But I need more experience.
No, it's the road. I was saying that to Raquel. I go, these roads are tough.
And the worst roads in the world.
It's desolate. I mean, it's really,
and that's the other thing I was saying.
really
You
desolate.
can't really do it by yourself because if you have a breakdown, you'll freeze at night.
Yeah,
Freeze to death. You've got to do it in a group of 2 or 3, preferably 3. So one can stay, the other can go and get help.
Look, it's
And that would mean more delays, and I would never get to. You've talked me into it.
This is his Kawasaki 650, complete with these scratch marks on the panniers left by a wild bear in Alaska that could smell the food. Kevin once tracked from Puerto del Inca on the Peruvian coast up to Cuzco along an old Inca trail. It was the trail that they brought fresh fish up using relay runners, and it took him 25 days. He said he could have done it quicker than 25 days, but he spent a lot of time looking for a mysterious engraved rock with different directions inscribed on it, and unfortunately he never found it. He was inspired by a book written by Victor Van Hagen in the 1950s, Highway of the Sun. The distance from the coast to Cuzco in a direct line is less than 360 kilometres. But when you take into consideration following a trail going up and down over mountains, rivers, passes, it would come out to around about 600 kilometres. But it's still possible to deliver fresh fish in less than 36 hours when you consider that total was divided up amongst dozens of relay runners called chasquis, and they only had to run about between 10 and 15 kilometres before handing over the delivery. Saying goodbye to Kevin and Raquel, we headed back to Cuzco, but we stopped at the town of Saya, renowned for its pork restaurants, which are called chicharronerias. I think that's how you pronounce it. And there are more than a dozen just in this little tiny town. This was pork crackling, while this was fried pork with fried chips, corn, and yerba buena, which we called spearmint. We parked our bikes right in front of the front door so we could keep an eye on them, along with this Labrador guard dog. Speaking of dogs, when we got back to La Estrelita, we saw this dog with no fur wearing a tiger print jumpsuit. These are native Peruvian hairless dogs, also known as viringos. Looks like a mother and her pup. They look a bit strange, but they're actually quite clean and hygienic because they don't have any hair, they don't have any fleas or ticks, and they make good pets for people with allergies. Some people put those little coats on them to keep them warm in the cold of Cuzco. It's thought they evolved on the hot desert coast of Peru, where it's so hot they wouldn't need any body hair to keep warm. One of the Spanish chronicles mentions that the Incas conquered a tribe called the Huancas, who were famous for eating dogs, and they even made trumpet horns out of their skulls. But the native Peruvian Viringo dogs were no match for the conquistadors' dogs of war, who were trained to attack and went into battle wearing body armour. The Spanish dogs were much more aggressive and were often sent into battle ahead of the cavalry and foot soldiers just to create mayhem and confusion amongst the natives. And two Spanish chronicles recount that the Spanish dogs were raised on human flesh from slaughtered South American native Indians. Peru is full of surprises. Another strange thing that they have here is this fruit, called pepino dulce or sweet cucumber. But actually it's not at all related to the cucumber. It's more closely related to potatoes, tomatoes, tobacco, all of which incidentally originate in the Americas.
Kind of like a pear, but not so sweet. Coming up in the next episode, we have...
These ruins are some of the most mysterious in all of Peru. I knew it was a dangerous area, but it offered a historic and unique view over the city of Cuzco for my gigapan.
Why did you give me a turtle?
You get it? It's a message to go slow.
Come out of your shell.
Enjoy the ride. Come out of your shell.
Gringo Loco asks,
Hit the subscribe button.
please subscribe.